The CEO, known for his quiet demeanor, entered his own dealership incognito. What he overheard a salesman say to a struggling single mother abruptly halted him and initiated an unforeseen sequence of events. Derek Belton appeared unremarkable, certainly not the person who authorized salaries for 137 employees. He wasn't wearing a blazer, didn't carry a briefcase, and he arrived without a driver. That morning, he wore faded Levi's, well-worn sneakers, and a Tennessee Titans cap shading his face. He would be unrecognizable, even to the regional manager he had dined with 2 Fridays prior. He parked his black 2011 Honda Accord a short distance away. It wasn't a necessity. He possessed the means for a garage full of luxury vehicles. However, today was not about displays of wealth. He walked the additional block quietly, noticing the texture of the pavement with each footfall. As the dealership appeared, the signage, crisp and prominent, displaying Belton Auto Group across the glass, caused him to hesitate. His name. But what was happening beneath the surface? The concerns had initially surfaced as quiet remarks. A customer in Murfreesboro reported being sold an extended warranty she didn't comprehend. A family in Franklin alleged their monthly payment differed from the agreed-upon amount. These were minor issues. However, they caused Derek to question things. This location in Charlotte, Tennessee had consistently been a high-volume dealership. It specialized in mid-range vehicles and enjoyed strong sales. People trusted this dealership, or they once did. The showroom doors opened as he entered. The air held the scent of coffee and Armor All. A bell chimed above him, yet no one acknowledged it. Derek surveyed the area. There were 3 sales desks and 2 salesmen engaged in conversation by the corner water cooler. A woman managed the reception desk, absorbed in her phone. He appeared unremarkable, and that was his intention. He began his assessment in the service bay. It was quiet, the technicians working diligently, focused on their tasks. He observed nothing unusual. He proceeded through the customer waiting area, observing a man browse a magazine as his daughter entertained herself on a damaged iPad. He received no assistance. There was no greeting, not even a simple acknowledgement. He approached the line of Camrys situated near the glass wall. A couple stood close by, engaged in a conversation with a salesman whose speech was rapid and overly enthusiastic. The older man appeared displeased. The woman seemed bothered. "Sir," the salesman stated, "you won't locate a more advantageous offer anywhere. This item is covered by warranty and has seen minimal use. However, I can offer this price only if we finalize the agreement today." "That's the current situation," Derek mentioned. He recognized this as a tactic he hadn't been taught and made a note to himself. He then proceeded around a corner close to the used inventory office and paused. A young woman, likely in her late 20s, wearing a light jacket and carrying a baby in a carrier, was speaking with a man in a navy blazer. She appeared anxious, repeatedly looking down at a well-worn envelope she held. It likely contained pay stubs or a bank statement. The salesman presented himself with an assured, perhaps overly confident, demeanor, speaking with charm and certainty. "You're receiving full coverage for the first 3 years?" the salesman stated. "Bumper to bumper plus powertrain. If anything breaks, even the air conditioning, it's covered." That was inaccurate. And the $895 fee I referenced, that's standard practice. We apply that to all our transactions. It covers a comprehensive pre-delivery inspection, interior cleaning, and anti-theft VIN etching. Derek paused. VIN etching? That practice had been removed from the dealership's process 3 years prior. And warranty coverage? No, that wasn't consistent with the terms. He had personally revised those contracts to ensure greater honesty and transparency. His pulse decelerated. He retreated a step back, out of their line of sight, heart pounding, but not from anger. It was disappointment. This was his business. This was his name. And this man was deceiving, with ease, a woman who appeared to have saved every cent to be present. Derek wasn't prepared to show himself. Not yet. He needed to observe the situation's extent. Derek moved discreetly behind a row of brochures close to the finance office, watching unseen. The woman nodded slowly in response to the salesman's words. Her fingers closed more firmly around the envelope. The baby in the carrier shifted and emitted a quiet whimper, but she seemed largely unaware. She was attempting to remain calm, likely assessing how closely the figures aligned with her budget. The salesman leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't need to worry," he said. "People get nervous about credit checks, but I know how to navigate the process. I'll get you into a vehicle today, even if we have to be resourceful." She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the exit. But the salesman kept his tone steady, reassuring. Too smooth, too confident, Derek clenched his jaw, then turned away. He didn't want her to feel observed. He walked towards the far end of the showroom, where a teenage boy was standing near a pre-owned SUV. A salesman passed him twice, without a greeting or any offer of assistance. He simply walked by. Derek moved next to the boy. "You're considering this one?" he asked. The teen looked over, seemingly a little taken aback. "Yeah, possibly. My aunt is outside. She asked me to check it out while she parks." Derek nodded. "Do you know what kind of engine it has?" The kid shrugged. "Not really. She simply requires a secure environment. Her vehicle malfunctioned last week, another incident. Another customer was missed. It was hurtful, not due to the lost transaction, but because it confirmed everything for Derek. At some point, they had ceased to listen, stopped acknowledging individuals. And it wasn't just a single problematic employee. It was a prevailing attitude, a recurring behavior. He proceeded towards the reception desk. The woman still hadn't looked up. She tapped her screen, chewing her gum, scrolling. Derek positioned himself in front of her, simply to gauge the situation. 10 seconds elapsed. Then 20. At last, she raised her head and blinked. "Oh, do you have an appointment?" "No," Derek replied calmly. "Just browsing." She responded with a languid smile, gesturing vaguely towards the floor. "They'll get to you." They did not. For the subsequent 30 minutes, Derek moved between various departments. The only assistance he received came from a young lot attendant named Trevor, who appeared to be no older than 19. He noticed Derek close to the service entrance and offered, "Sir, do you need anything? We have water inside. I can get you a brochure if you're interested in the new hybrids." Derek smiled and replied, "I'm good. Thank you." He then asked, "What's your name?" Trevor responded, "Trevor." "Do you like it here, Trevor?" Trevor paused. "It's all right. People can be rude. Not just customers, but sometimes managers too. I prefer to keep to myself." "Do they treat customers fairly?" Trevor looked down. Most of the time. There was no bitterness in his tone. Derek placed a reassuring hand on the kid's shoulder. "Be careful who teaches you what," he advised. Trevor looked at him, then nodded. Before Derek could say anything further, a familiar laugh came from the glass hallway. Brent Collar, the salesman, was now leading the young mother toward a side office. Her name tag said Brent Collar. She appeared overwhelmed, holding her papers tightly. Derek kept a discreet distance as he watched. Brent paused before the office door, retrieved paperwork from a file, and announced, "Here's the first quote. It's going to appear high initially, but please don't worry. I'll adjust it once I input your information into the system. This is our standard procedure." Derek moved nearer, feigning interest in a flyer on the wall. From his position, he observed the quote. The figures were inflated. Listed were charges for warranty, dealership fees, VIN etching, and a maintenance guarantee, all non-standard and unapproved. This was everything Derek had worked to eliminate years prior. Brent, however, did not appear to be a person apprehensive about disregarding regulations. He presented as someone who believed no one was observing. Brent indicated for the woman to take a seat. She settled into the chair, moving her baby's carrier to the floor nearby. The little girl made a soft whimpering sound and kicked gently, yet Brent did not even look down. His gaze remained focused on the documents he held, turning pages, emphasizing sections, and drawing circles. Each action appeared rehearsed, refined, and routine. "We're going to structure this to ensure your monthly payment stays under $350, he stated. The woman offered a slow, cautious nod. "What's your name again?" he inquired, barely looking up. "Monique," she replied. "Monique Ellis." Derek stood just outside the office, back against the wall, feigning interest in the certified pre-owned display. He overheard every word. Brent smiled. All right, Monique, you're going to love this. You're approved for a 2019 Corolla. Excellent condition, low mileage. That's a significant advantage. We remain committed to your protection. Therefore, we're providing a 3-year full coverage plan. This includes everything from the engine to the electronics. Roadside assistance is also included should you lock your keys in the car. That level of peace of mind? Priceless. Derek's hand slowly curled into a fist by his side. However, there was no such plan, not like Brent described it. And the quote, the one he'd caught a glimpse of earlier, had extra charges tucked in every margin. Some of them were outright fiction. Monique adjusted in her chair. So, is all of that included in the price? Brent offered a warm, reassuring smile. It's all part of your protection package. We simply itemize it separately on the form. This simplifies things for the finance office. He continued, speaking rapidly and with excessive confidence, gesturing with a pen as if performing a magic trick. He even produced a calculator to minimize the appearance of the payment amount. For example, without the package, your monthly cost would be $384. With the included safeguard, the price reduces to $349. More manageable, isn't it? Derek scrutinized the figures. That calculation appeared illogical. It seemed like a deceptive tactic. He couldn't fathom how Brent maintained his composure. But it was evident this wasn't his first presentation. Then Monique posed a question that silenced the room. Do you believe I could return tomorrow? She inquired softly. I simply want to ensure I fully grasp everything first. Brent's demeanor subtly altered, a nearly imperceptible change. His jaw tightened briefly. However, he quickly regained his composure, adopting a more affable tone. I completely understand, he said smoothly. But the situation is that this car has 2 other potential buyers. One of them test drove it earlier today. I can't guarantee it will still be available tomorrow. You wouldn't want to miss out because of a minor consideration, would you? Monique blinked. Her fingers shifted around her envelope. Brent quietly lowered his voice, leaning closer. Listen, I've witnessed individuals leave, intending to consider it further overnight. Then the car was gone, and they were facing a situation that was more difficult and costly. You deserve something better, and this is it. He pushed the documents across to her. That was the end of it. Derek entered the office, maintaining a calm but resolute tone. That doesn't sound like the protection plan we provide, Brent said, blinking. Monique turned to Derek, appearing surprised. Brent quickly regained his composure. Pardon me? Derek repeated, the plan you're describing doesn't exist, not in that form. Brent lifted an eyebrow, assessing Derek. Do you work here? Something like that. Brent chuckled dryly. Look, I don't know who you are, but I've been here for 4 years. I know the packages inside and out. Derek pointed to the quote. Show me where it says full electronics coverage. Show me where VAR and etching is required. Show me the breakdown. Brent hesitated. It's in the system. Finance will explain it better. No, Derek said flatly. You explain it right now. Monique rose slowly in front of her, holding her baby close. Brent's face flushed. I don't have to deal with this. You're not even. But he stopped speaking. The general manager had just appeared behind Derek, his eyes wide. Mr. Belton, the manager said. Brent's mouth dropped open. Derek didn't smile, didn't say a word. He turned toward Monique. I'm sorry, he said softly. This isn't how we treat people. Not here, not under my name. But this wasn't over, not yet. The repercussions extended beyond a single falsehood. The room seemed to contract the instant the name, Mebleton, was spoken. Brent's complexion turned ashen. His assured demeanor disappeared, as if it were vapor on a chilled surface. Monique looked back and forth between the 2 men, bewildered, still cradling her baby, uncertain of the situation she's entered. Derek subtly turned to the general manager, standing in the doorway. He requested a conference room, speaking softly. Jeff Lorman, the manager, a man with a flushed face, nodded and indicated a hallway located at the rear of the showroom. Derek turned to Monique and spoke in a quiet, reassuring voice. Please come with me. I want to correct this. She paused briefly, then followed. Her movements were deliberate but hesitant. The baby began to stir again, perhaps reacting to the palpable tension. As they passed the workstations, The entire level appeared to become silent. Telephones ceased their ringing, and conversations were interrupted. Several employees glanced over their workstations and angled towards one another, speaking quietly. Trevor, the lot attendant from earlier, positioned himself close to the entrance and offered Derek a knowing look, but remained silent. Within the compact, glass-enclosed conference room, Derek drew out a chair for Monique and settled opposite her. Jeff entered behind them, appearing noticeably uneasy. Brent followed, attempting to seem unconcerned but without success. He folded his arms and rested against the distant wall. Derek took the folder Brent had put on the table. "Is this the quote you gave her?" he asked, not looking up. Brent moved slightly. "Yes." Derek opened the folder, laid out the pages, and circled several numbers with a pen from the table's holder. "Explain these," he said. Brent sat up straighter. "Look, I don't know why I'm being questioned." "Explain them." Brent paused. He looked at Jeff, hoping for support, but Jeff avoided his gaze. "I mean, those are standard charges. Everyone includes them. Do you have documentation showing these fees were authorized?" Derek inquired. "They should be in the system." "No, they aren't," Derek replied, his voice gaining strength. "I was involved in revising the system. That VIN etching fee? It was discontinued in 2021. Powertrain coverage? It's limited to 5 years, not the comprehensive coverage you advertised. You added more than $2,000 in fabricated fees to a customer who came here simply trying to purchase a secure vehicle for her baby." Monique's hands trembled a little as she listened, but she did not speak. Her gaze remained on the document. "You stated the payment would be $349, Dara proceeded. "That is achievable only if she provides a down payment you failed to disclose. Furthermore, the interest rate you presented to her is inflated by a minimum of 2.5%. You are not just misleading Brent, you are being dishonest." Brent moved away from the wall and straightened. "I have consistently met my quarterly goals. Customers leave satisfied. I understand sales, all right?" Derek moved closer. "You know how to apply undue influence. A distinction exists." Jeff finally spoke. "Derek, I didn't know he was doing all that, I swear. We've been busy and the numbers have been good." "That's exactly the problem," Derek interjected. "You cared about the numbers, I cared about the people." Monique rose then, slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "I thought this was a good place," she said quietly. "I really thought this was different." Derek turned to her. "It was supposed to be, and I'm sorry it wasn't." He reached into his back pocket, retrieved his wallet, and produced a card. "This is my direct line. I will personally ensure you receive a fair deal. If you desire the car, you'll obtain it at the correct price, free of unnecessary complications." She accepted the card deliberately. "Thank you," she said. "We'll have someone else manage the paperwork," Derek added. "Someone who doesn't fabricate figures." Brent's arms fell to his sides. "Clean out your desk," Derek stated, rising. "You are terminated here." There was no room for discussion. You were aware of that, yet disregarded it. Brent didn't object further. He left abruptly, speaking quietly to himself. No one pursued him. Derek addressed Jeff. "We aren't finished talking either." He stated, "I'll see you in your office in 10. Subsequently, he held the door for Monique and guided her back towards the lobby. People glanced around. Conversations began anew, subdued and apprehensive. Derek remained silent until they arrived at the reception desk. He regarded the woman seated there. "Did you greet her upon her arrival?" The receptionist hesitated, then swallowed. "I don't recall." Derek slowly shook his head. "Begin to recall, or begin searching." However, dismissing a single employee wouldn't resolve the underlying issues. Derek recognized that a cultural shift was necessary, or the company would decline from within. Derek was seated alone in Jeff Lorman's office, gazing out at the dealership floor through the blinds. A heavy silence filled the room. From behind the closed door, the usual showroom sounds had resumed. The usual sounds filled the office: casual chatter, the click of footsteps on tile, and ringing phones. However, a new feeling now permeated the atmosphere, a sense of unease. He glanced up as Jeff entered, his movements uncertain. The man appeared diminished, as if suddenly aware of his oversight. Jeff took a seat without prompting. I was unaware, he said softly. I truly swear to you, Derek, I wasn't aware Brent was engaging in that activity. But you were aware of something, Derek responded. You knew complaints were increasing. You were aware that deals were becoming more competitive. You were also aware that customer satisfaction scores decreased last quarter, and you attributed it to the surveys used. Jeff remained silent. Derek moved forward, resting his elbows on the desk. What happened to what we created here? He asked. I thought we were performing well, Jeff stated. The numbers were strong. Staff turnover was minimal. I assumed perhaps the industry simply shifted slightly. The industry didn't shift, Derek responded, maintaining a calm tone. We did. We lost sight of why people initially came here. We ceased prioritizing customer relationships and began focusing on achieving sales targets. Jeff sighed, massaging his face. So what's the plan? We need a thorough overhaul, Derek stated. And that extends beyond dismissing Brent. I require a review of every transaction from the past 90 days. Reimburse any clients where the terms weren't transparently conveyed. Furthermore, I want individual meetings with each salesperson. I need to understand their training processes, the priorities they receive, and to identify anyone else who believes it's acceptable to deceive customers with a friendly demeanor. Jeff acknowledged slowly. And one more thing, Derek added, I want Trevor in my office next week. Jeff blinked. The lot kid? Derek replied, yeah, he's one of the only ones who looked a customer in the eye today. That matters. A knock at the door interrupted them. The receptionist appeared, visibly nervous. Mr. Belton, the customer, Monique Ellis, is still in the lounge, she said. She said she's waiting for her ride. Derek stood. Please get her a bottle of water and offer her a seat in the private lounge, away from the plastic chairs near the vending machine. Make sure she feels valued. The receptionist acknowledged promptly and went to attend to the request. Derek returned to the showroom. Several employees glanced up, but there was no conversation. Some consciously avoided eye contact. Monique was situated in the far corner, her baby now asleep in the carrier beside her. She appeared weary, not only physically, but also emotionally drained. He approached her gently. This is a lot, he admitted. More than you anticipated, she replied with a gentle smile. I've faced tougher situations, he stated. I understand that, but you shouldn't have had to experience this, she said, shrugging. People deceive me frequently. It happens at work, in shops, and even at the clinic. I'm accustomed to it. That comment resonated more deeply than he anticipated. You shouldn't be exposed to that, and certainly not here. That's my responsibility. She then focused on him, truly observing him. Why did you come in today? Why are you dressed like that? Derek offered a soft smile. She stifled a quiet chuckle, noting people rarely shared the full truth with the man in the suit. He then presented her with a small folder. If you're still interested in that car, these are the accurate figures. There are no hidden details. I had our finance manager verify them directly. Furthermore, we've included a year of service maintenance at no cost. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Why? He replied, because someone needs to remind this place of its values. Shortly after, a silver hatchback, distinguished by a missing hubcap, arrived to take her away. Her sister signaled from the driver's seat. Monique rose, corrected the carrier, and glanced back at Derek. Don't let them ruin what you built, she said. I won't, he replied. She exited without a backward look. But restoring Monique's confidence was not the only task. It involved rebuilding the confidence of every person who had ever entered those doors. Derek returned 3 days later. This time, there was no disguise, no cap, no jeans. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit and entered through the front doors as if he belonged. And in truth, he did. This wasn't intended as a display of dominance. It was a matter of responsibility. The entire staff had received notification that morning. Scheduled meetings were canceled, and phone lines were redirected to voicemail. The dealership remained open, but no sales transactions would occur prior to 11 a.m. Derek had arranged a company-wide meeting, and every employee attended, including those on part-time shifts. The group assembled in the break room, squeezed together amongst vending machines and aged chairs. Several were leaning against the walls. Trevor stood toward the rear, his arms crossed, but attentive. Jeff was seated near the front, a notebook open but unused. Derek addressed them, speaking plainly without a microphone or podium. I established this company in 2004, he began, not through investors or a franchise agreement, but with a used car lot situated behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. During the first week, I sold 3 cars, personally washing each one. Some individuals quietly expressed amusement. At that time, I wasn't sure if I would succeed, but I possessed 2 valuable assets: my reputation and my commitment to honesty. I consistently ensured I could fulfill any promise made and avoided dishonesty when closing deals. The atmosphere in the room was now quiet. However, a significant shift has occurred, he continued. This isn't limited to a single salesperson. It's about how we compromise on minor details and prioritize speed over customer care. We've begun to see individuals as sales goals rather than human beings. That's not what I built. That's not who we are. He looked around the room. If you've ever included an additional charge because you believed you could, if you've ever hurried a woman out the door because she didn't appear to be able to afford our services, if you've ever spoken condescendingly to someone simply because you were able, today marks a turning point. A few people visibly expressed discomfort. You have a choice, he said. The situation demanded a resolution, either assistance or a new employment opportunity. Silence followed, then a voice spoke up. It was Trevor, Mr. Belton, and Derek turned to him. Yeah, Trevor said, appearing nervous, but proceeding anyway. What if some of us were performing well, but no one acknowledged it? Derek smiled. Then we need to start noticing. Starting today, he walked over and handed Trevor a small envelope. Inside was a letter of promotion, from lot attendant to junior sales associate, including full training and benefits. Trevor blinked. Are you serious? Derek stated, because the people who treat others with respect are the ones I want representing my name. Following the meeting, changes occurred rapidly. Brent's deals were reviewed. 5 of them necessitated full or partial refunds. Monique's case served as the focus of a training seminar. Every single manager was obligated to participate in a 3-week ethics and customer care workshop. Derek even re-engaged a retired employee. Arlene Cupp, a direct woman in her 60s who previously managed the front desk, had departed 2 years prior, citing a change in the atmosphere. She was now the new head of customer relations. Arlene's initial action involved installing a glass wall separating the sales desk and the finance office, ensuring transparency in all communications. Derek walked through the lot that Friday, observing the staff's interactions. A subtle shift permeated the atmosphere, not flawless, but calmer, more deliberate, stemming from understanding rather than apprehension. He observed a young salesperson patiently explaining trim-level differences to an older gentleman, ensuring he was heard. This detail, absent from any spreadsheet, held greater significance than any monthly performance goal. Arlene approached. It appears they recall their employer, she remarked, and rightfully so. Derek responded, stating he wasn't leaving, although one element remained. The core reason for this endeavor needed to be revisited. That Sunday morning, Derek was seated on the porch of his mother's former residence in Jackson, Tennessee. The sun had just begun to rise, and the air retained the stillness of the early hours. He took his coffee slowly, looking out at the yard he previously mowed every Saturday during his teenage years. Years had passed since her passing, yet the atmosphere of the place remained unchanged. Now, it belonged to him, recollection solidified in brick and wood. He retrieved a photograph from his jacket pocket, the image faded with curled edges. The picture showed him, no older than 10, standing next to his mother before a dull, rust-colored Oldsmobile. Her smile was broad and proud, not due to the car's newness as it wasn't, but because it was hers. That marked the day she purchased her first vehicle independently. He recalled how she, a nurse, managed without a co-signer or assistance, relying solely on her paycheck and a salesman who painstakingly explained each document before she signed. Derek remembered her meticulously verifying every detail. He remembered her asking questions, even when her voice wavered, and how the man behind the desk never made her feel inadequate for doing so. He remembered that. And now, decades later, he occupied the man's position behind the desk. He was the man whose name appeared above the showroom. He was the person who influenced every customer's experience upon entering. He looked at the picture once more. That instance profoundly impacted him, teaching him that dignity wasn't something acquired through wealth. It was something inherent, deserved simply by being present and making an effort. The world hadn't been kind to his mother, but on that day, she received recognition, and he carried that with him. Returning to the dealership the following week, Derek requested a new plaque be installed by the entrance. The message stated that we treat each customer as if they were purchasing their first car, demonstrating dignity, patience, and honesty. It wasn't intended for widespread attention or media coverage. The goal was for every employee to read it daily. Trevor read it every morning, first thing. Monique returned a month later to have her car serviced. She entered wearing a hoodie, holding her daughter, and smiled upon seeing Trevor at the desk. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled in return. "Of course I do. We had her in that silver Corolla, correct?" She affirmed. "She's performing well." They continued their conversation briefly, covering minor details, and the interaction felt comfortable, because now it felt natural. Derek observed from his office, unnoticed, simply watching. He didn't require attention. He desired none. The focus wasn't on him. The purpose was this: you don't establish a successful business solely on profit. You build it on trust, on the manner in which you treat people when you believe no one is observing. He learned that from his mom. He communicated this to others via Brent. And now, with each handshake, each sale, each explanation provided without pressure or misleading information, he was restoring it. Incrementally, deliberately, that's what integrity truly represents. Not something asserted, something safeguarded. For once lost, regaining it demands all your resources. And Derek Belton refused to allow his reputation to signify anything other than honesty. If this story resonated with you personally, if it brought to mind a time you felt disregarded, or a time someone championed you when they weren't obligated to, please subscribe. We have more stories coming that speak to the heart, not just the headline. After a reserved black girl experiences severe bullying at her new school, no one intervenes until her father, a man with a concealed past he's long tried to keep hidden, resolves to speak out. Imani Reddick stood near the side entrance of Halston Middle School, clutching her backpack strap until her fingers hurt. She didn't cry. That wasn't her way. She remained silent, her chin slightly lowered, observing the stream of students who didn't even acknowledge her. She had discovered that remaining unnoticed could offer more protection than being visible. Mobile, Alabama, was not her home. Her home was Savannah, or at least it had been, that old brick apartment with the broken mailbox and the familiar smell of fried fish every Sunday. But her father insisted they needed a fresh beginning. Consequently, they were now living in a duplex with 2 white walls and neighbors who offered no greetings. Her initial week at Halston High had been largely uneventful. The teachers were courteous, her coursework was within her abilities, and the cafeteria food was acceptable. Children possessed a remarkable ability to detect subtle shifts, much like dogs identifying fear. Imani rarely spoke unless necessary. Her father often remarked that her voice carried weight, and she avoided using it for casual conversation. Her hair was styled in precise twists. Her shoes were polished, and her clothes were neatly pressed. She presented a simple, intelligent appearance, avoiding anything ostentatious, simply careful. She actively avoided drawing attention to herself. However, on Thursday, attention sought her out regardless. She walked along the B Hall corridor, on her way to science class, when a tall boy with sunburned cheeks and a smug look blocked her path. "Hey," he said, tilting his head like a puppy feigning friendliness. "You don't talk much, do you?" Imani blinked at him, uncertain if it was a question or a challenge. "What's wrong?" he pressed. "Are you too good to say hi?" She replied softly, attempting to move past. He shifted aside and bumped her shoulder, causing her to stumble slightly. "Chill out." She simply acknowledged him. He didn't respond, continuing his walk, his heartbeat quickening unexpectedly. His name was Tyler McHale. She discovered this later during gym class, when he erupted in laughter during a basketball game and called another student slow as hell, a comment audible to everyone in the room. The other boys joined in his laughter. Even the coach remained largely silent. Tyler McHale was known for a certain behavior, though it was rarely spoken of directly. He belonged to that category of children best left undisturbed, especially if you valued tranquility. Imani recognized the pattern. He possessed the hallmarks: boisterous, presumptuous, and exhibiting a subtle cruelty that often escaped adult observation. That evening, at their residence, her father posed the customary inquiry. "How was school, dear?" She responded with a slight lift of her shoulders. "Okay. Anyone causing you difficulties?" She denied it with a headshake. Darius Reddick scrutinized her expression. His gaze was penetrating. It didn't gloss over details. She held his gaze for a moment, then averted her eyes and began to play with her fork. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" he said. "I know." She didn't elaborate. He didn't press. He always respected boundaries. That's what he's taught her since she was little. A reserved child isn't fragile. They're simply waiting for the appropriate moment to share. Imani hoped that principle still applied. But the atmosphere of Halston was altered. This wasn't Savannah. This wasn't the neighborhood where Miss Charlene looked after her when her dad worked late, or where Mr. Jalen across the street gave her peppermints on Sundays. This place didn't feel like it had people, just moving pieces. On Friday, Tyler walked past her in the lunch line and accidentally knocked her tray sideways. Chicken tenders and mashed potatoes hit the floor. "Oh, my bad," he said with a smirk. "Didn't see you there." Some kids laughed. Others looked away. The cafeteria monitor hardly looked up. Imani crouched to gather the tray, her cheeks flushed, but her expression unreadable. She remained silent, simply tidying up and moving to the rear of the queue. Tyler departed as if everything was normal. However, it was significant, especially for her. But that was only the start, and the most difficult moments were still to come. By the second week, the cafeteria event felt like an introduction. Tyler had made it his purpose. Imani didn't understand why. Perhaps it stemmed from her lack of visible reaction compared to others. Or maybe because she didn't appear afraid, despite feeling it. Regardless, Tyler perceived this as a challenge. Initially, it manifested as hushed comments behind her in the hallway. This escalated to staged applause when she responded to questions in class. Following her excellent score on an English pop quiz, he publicly questioned, what's she attempting to demonstrate? Trying to be the teacher's favorite or something. During gym class one day, she was the last person chosen for teams. Tyler, positioned beside the student selecting players, whispered, "She probably doesn't even sweat like the rest of us, but she thinks she's too good to stink." He spoke loud enough for 3 other boys to overhear. They laughed. Imani didn't respond. Her lack of reaction served as her shield. However, silence can sometimes exacerbate the situation. By Wednesday, the conflict escalated to physical actions. One morning, she entered class to discover someone had written "mute monkey" across her desk in pencil. She paused, studying the words briefly, before retrieving her eraser. Her hand moved deliberately as she erased. She detected muffled laughter nearby. Later that afternoon, in the hallway, Tyler passed by and murmured, "Better get used to it." That evening, she returned home with a torn strap on her backpack. Her father immediately observed the damage. "What happened?" Darius inquired. "It got caught in the locker hinge," she replied. He remained silent, not meeting her gaze, for a significant pause. Then, in a measured tone, he asked, "You sure about that?" She confirmed with a nod. "Yeah." Darius observed her for a few more seconds, his expression strained. He rose, proceeded to the kitchen, and opened a drawer. Returning with an antique sewing kit, he began to mend the strap while she sat at the table, feigning study. The quiet returned. It wasn't oppressive, just commonplace. She understood he was hesitant. She also recognized he would wait however long she required. A tightness began to build within her, feelings she couldn't articulate. Friday proved to be particularly difficult. During lunchtime, Tyler positioned himself directly across from her, without an invitation or a tray, simply offering a smile. "You don't enjoy conversation, do you?" he remarked, tapping the table with his fingers. "Are you one of those peculiar individuals? Do you believe yourself superior to others?" Imani continued eating, deliberately slow, bite after bite. "I asked you a question," he stated, raising his voice. "Or are you too unintelligent to respond?" Those nearby began to observe the exchange. Several phones were unavailable. Imani glanced up at last. "No," she stated. "No what?" she asked. "I don't believe I'm improved. I simply dislike waste." Immediately after the words were spoken, a plate of spaghetti launched from the periphery. It struck her chest, coating her shirt with red sauce and onto her lap. Amusement rang out. She rose deliberately, making no effort to clean the sauce, simply fixing her gaze on Tyler. His eyes widened, not with fear, merely with surprise. The lunch monitor arrived, predictably late. "What happened?" she asked, her expression already frustrated. Imani remained silent, instead choosing to gather her tray and proceed to the closest trash can. Sauce dripped, and her shirt was stained. Her heart pounded in her chest. That night, she skipped dinner. Her father knocked twice on her door before entering. She was seated on the floor, altering the shirt in her sketch pad, drawing thick black lines over what used to be white cotton. "Baby girl," he said quietly. She didn't answer. He came and sat beside her. "I've been keeping my peace," he said, "trying to let you breathe, give you time. But I know something's going on, and I ain't the type to just sit back while my daughter's hurting." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "I can handle it." "I know you can," he said. However, that shouldn't necessarily be the case. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was how near things were to spiraling out of control. It happened the following Tuesday. The school day felt long and tiresome. Imani kept her head down, remained in the back of classrooms, and avoided the cafeteria entirely. She learned which bathrooms were usually empty, which hallways had working cameras, and which ones didn't. However, you can't account for everything. Following sixth period, she was walking along the east hallway. The walls were bare, the lockers were damaged, and there was little movement. Her backpack felt unusually heavy, not due to books, but from the burden she carried within. Feelings of anger, shame, and a nameless sensation that lingered behind her eyes, occasionally causing them to sting without explanation. Then she detected it, the sound of footsteps behind her. Rapid. She didn't look back, simply increasing her pace. However, a sudden shove followed. Forceful. Her shoulder impacted the metal lockers. Her bag slipped from her arm and landed on the floor. "What's your problem, freak?" Tyler's voice echoed behind her, too loud for the space. Imani turned slowly, breathing through her nose. "I'm not bothering you," she said. "Do you think you can disrespect me in front of everybody and get away with it?" He stepped closer. "Go away, Tyler. Or what? I'll tell someone." He grinned. "Like who? Those teachers that don't even look at you? Please." Imani didn't move, didn't blink. Tyler looked down, then abruptly reached for her backpack. She moved to obstruct him. A misjudgment. He pushed her again, this time using both hands. She stumbled. Her shoe snagged on the wall trim, and her head impacted the corner of the locker with a muted, unpleasant sound. She fell to the floor, as if her supports had been severed. A moment of stillness followed. Even Tyler recoiled slightly. Imani remained motionless. Blood began to trickle down the side of her face, a single streak across her cheek. A janitor located down the hall abruptly rounded the corner. His mop stopped in its motion. "Hey, what is happening?" he exclaimed, hurrying toward the scene. Tyler ran. The ambulance arrived in just minutes. The principal appeared suddenly, with a phone in hand, a worried tone of voice, and a visibly pale expression. The quiet moment they had previously afforded Tyler had vanished. By the time Darius received the notification, Imani was already at Springdale Medical Center. A nurse informed him that she was awake but required stitches. She sustained a mild concussion and had swelling on the left side of her face. He remained silent. He entered her room, his eyes carefully observing every detail, as if committing it to memory. She appeared smaller in the hospital bed. not delicate, merely smaller than he recalled. She turned her head slowly upon seeing him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. That was what affected him deeply. "Don't," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "Don't apologize." Her lips trembled. "You instructed me to inform you when I required your presence. I am here now," he stated. He remained still. He sat with her for hours. He barely blinked. Nurses came and went. At one point, he asked one of them, gently, how many times the school had called about incidents with Imani. The nurse looked at her chart, then looked back at him. The answer was none. He stared straight ahead after that. When they finally got home, Imani went straight to bed. Darius didn't. He sat in the dark at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes locked on a spot on the wall. He rose, proceeded to the rear closet, and retrieved an aged shoebox. The contents were innocuous. No weapons were present. No firearms. No blades. Only a folded sheet of paper, a photograph of a man he hadn't seen in 10 years, and a telephone number penned in diminishing blue ink. He examined it intently. Subsequently, he grasped the telephone and initiated a call. "Hello?" A voice responded. "It's me," Darius stated. A pause ensued. "Didn't expect to ever hear from you. I require information." "Regarding what?" "A boy. Caucasian. 13 years old. Tyler McHale." A mobile phone notification. A moment of silence. What is the meaning of this? He had admitted my daughter to the hospital. A lengthy pause followed. Then, one day prior, Darius terminated the call. He remained motionless, suspended in quiet. A part of him, long suppressed and deeply concealed, began to react. It wasn't anger, not even aggression, simply heightened awareness. However, making a call of that nature meant inviting consequence. And once a path was opened, unwelcome elements often entered, difficult to retract. 15 years ago, Darius Reddick was recognized under a different identity. In Savannah, the name Deke commanded attention. He wasn't boisterous, nor did he act impulsively, yet he consistently achieved his objectives. His methods were subtle, a quietness that instilled unease. Debts were settled, and disappearances were understood, thanks to him. He avoided direct violence, except in matters close to him, which were infrequent. Deke didn't seek a leadership role. He shunned the public eye. He positioned himself just behind those in power, and that's where true influence resided. But then Marissa became pregnant. Marissa wasn't living on the streets. She was pursuing her education to become a nurse. She was known for her beauty, directness, and intelligence. When she informed Darius they were expecting a child, a change occurred within him. He began to contemplate his lasting impact. He thought about what his daughter would perceive when she looked at him. He worried about the number of falsehoods it would require to conceal his true identity from her. Marissa did not survive the delivery. A tragic accident occurred. A rainy night, a drunk driver. She was gone, suddenly. Without warning, Darius was left with only a 5-pound baby girl who inherited her mother's eyes. Following this, he vanished, abandoning Savannah. He severed connections, sold the vehicles, concealed the cash, destroyed the phone, and relocated to smaller towns, securing unassuming jobs and maintaining a solitary existence. For 14 years, he erased himself from view, all for Imani. However, the phone call he initiated that night, after observing her at the hospital, marked the beginning of the unraveling. The individual he contacted, Terrence Bug Nichols, was not a friend. Not really. More like someone utilized when results were needed without interference. 3 days after the call, Bug sent a message. Tyler McHale, son of Curtis McHale, was with Mobile PD. Curtis ran a side job for a while, moving product through impounded vehicles. He was caught 5 years ago, but avoided conviction on a technicality. He still wears the badge. Still corrupt. Darius considered this information. He did not desire vengeance. This was not about harming a child. Understanding that his father was a man who abused his authority to manipulate people was a different matter. It suggested Tyler was acting aggressively because he's avoided repercussions. Someone had instilled in him the belief that there would be no accountability. This ignited a deep anger within Darius, an anger he hadn't felt in a considerable time. He drove across town that night. He parked a few blocks from an old warehouse by the train yard. He knocked once, then twice slow. Bug answered. His face appeared older. His body seemed thicker, but those eyes, still cold. Thought you were out for good. Bug said. I was. Bug gestured for him to come inside. So what changed? Darius looked around. Metal shelves, old crates, a faint hum of radio static in the corner. I need to scare somebody. Bug raised an eyebrow. Scare. I want the message to land, but no blood. Bug chuckled. That ain't your usual style. I'm not that man anymore. Bug looked at him for a long second, then nodded. All right, I got someone who owes me. Real discreet. Ex-military. Now works security. He will leave a note they will remember. No threats. No harm. Just presence, Darius stated. Bug grinned. You want to haunt the man. Precisely. 2 days later, Curtis McHale returned home to discover his front door slightly ajar. Inside, nothing was stolen. However, every drawer had been opened, and his framed awards were placed face down. A single Polaroid photo rested on his recliner, an image of Curtis from 5 years ago, hands cuffed, head down, flanked by officers. On the back, a simple sentence. If anything happens to my child again, yours is next. Curtis failed to report the incident. He understood the protocol. This was not something you concealed. During that same week, Tyler ceased attending school. There was no official notification. No farewell. Imani observed his absence, but remained silent. She returned to her classes, head held high, quiet, but no longer concealed. However, Darius recognized that revisiting the past doesn't always allow it to settle. Occasionally, it resurfaces with anger. The house phone rang shortly after 11:30 p.m. Darius seldom answered calls from numbers he didn't recognize, but a feeling compelled him to answer. He remained silent, simply waiting. A low, familiar, and dry voice spoke. You made noise, Deke. Darius paused before responding. Then he requested silence, just a presence. The voice emitted a chuckle. Yeah, well, some presence echoes louder than you think. Darius gripped the phone more firmly. Who is this? The voice inquired. You remember Devin Mars? That name caused a sharp, uncomfortable feeling in his throat. Devin Mars had previously worked as a problem solver in Savannah. Uncompromising, precise, and driven by ambition. Darius had wronged him several years prior when Mars threatened someone Darius valued. The incident concluded with a tense confrontation that was never discussed. Until now. He currently resides in Pensacola, involved in real estate, nightclubs, and politics. His child attends Halston Prep. Rumors suggest he's become aware of your name once more. And he's displeased. Darius leaned back in his chair, the kitchen clock ticking behind him like a countdown. I'm no longer part of that world. Then why was your name being circulated again? Click. The line disconnected. For the next hour, Darius remained silent. His thoughts raced. Devin Mars did not forgive, and he did not forget. If his name was being passed around, that meant others were paying attention as well. It wasn't just about Tyler anymore. It was about what people believed Darius might become again. The mere thought of it made his stomach churn. He recalled Imani, how she used to fall asleep on his chest. She remembered how she'd learned to walk with her arms out like wings. He'd promised her a different life, a quiet one. But quiet wasn't always safe. At school, people noticed Imani was walking a little taller. She didn't smile much, but her silence now felt different. Less like retreat, more like strength. Her teacher, Miss Kendrick, pulled her aside after class. I just want to say I'm sorry we didn't do more. We should have, she said. Imani looked her in the eye. I am not relying on others to act appropriately anymore. Miss Kendrick stopped. You possess more strength than you realize. However, strength was insufficient on its own. On that Friday, a black SUV with tinted windows arrived outside the school precisely as the final bell sounded. The vehicle was not the property of a parent, and it remained parked. Imani observed it. A feeling, not of fear but of familiarity, churned in her stomach. She didn't know who was inside, but she had seen a car like that previously, back in Savannah. Following her grandmother's funeral, she informed her father that evening. Darius didn't inquire. He simply moved to the rear room and retrieved a phone from a drawer. Instead of contacting Bug, He dialed another number. A woman answered, her voice raspy, reminiscent of gravel and whiskey. "It's been a long time, Deke." "Too long, Tanya. I heard you went soft." "I did on purpose," he replied. She chuckled once. "That's good, but now you're calling. I need eyes on a vehicle." A black SUV with Florida license plates was parked outside Halston Middle School. A moment of silence followed. Then, a voice said, "I'll have something for you tomorrow." That night, Darius remained near Imani's bedroom door. This wasn't due to a lack of faith in the locks. It was simply the spot where he felt most at ease. The following day, Tanya returned the call. "The vehicles are connected to Mars nightclub. They are not registered in his name, but his driver utilizes them. Imani's school is not part of his typical route." Darius took a deep breath. He is currently not taking any action. He was either sending a message or anticipating one from you. That afternoon, Darius drove to Pensacola. There were no weapons and no threats. Only an old envelope containing a picture of Marissa, Imani's mother. He gave it to the security guard at Mars Club. He instructed the guard to tell Deke that this was now the only thing that mattered, and that if anything happened to her, he would not engage in conversation. The guard remained silent, accepting the envelope and retreating as if it were hazardous material. Darius did not wait for acknowledgement and returned home in silence. When individuals such as Mars are provoked, they do not allow the matter to drop. They identify vulnerabilities, and Darius possessed one. It began with a package. Small, plain, without a return address. It was sitting on Darius's porch 2 mornings after his trip to Pensacola. He understood he should not touch it immediately. He examined it, studied the corners. There were no wires. There was no unusual weight. Nevertheless, he opened it outdoors, cautiously, using a pocket knife he hadn't used in years. Inside was a USB drive. Nothing else. He brought inside. He connected it to the older laptop he's kept isolated from network. The screen displayed a solitary video file. It was labeled property. He initiated playback. Grainy security camera footage from a grocery store parking lot appeared. Imani was visible near the front entrance, using her phone. Then a figure entered the scene. He didn't approach her. He didn't speak. He simply stood across the lot facing her, watching. Subsequently, he walked away. The camera followed his movement. He was a white man, with a shaved head, wearing a blue jacket. A face Darius recognized. An old Mars enforcer. Still alive, it seemed. No warning had been given. None was necessary. The meaning was unmistakable. We could contact her whenever we pleased. Darius shut the laptop and remained motionless for a considerable time. Afterward, he entered the bathroom and studied his reflection. He no longer resembled Deke. The beard was flecked with gray. His hands appeared heavier than before. Yet something within him, something cold and sharp, remained untouched. He picked up the phone and initiated one last call. "It's important that they all be present," he stated. 3 hours later, he found himself in the back room of a car shop in Foley. 5 men were seated around him. Each possessed a history they hadn't documented. "Tell me why we're here," one of them inquired. "They threatened my daughter," Darius responded. There was no request for verification. His delivery wasn't challenged. "They intend to intimidate me into submission, but I've remained silent for 14 years. That's sufficient." "So what's the plan?" Darius asked, leaning forward. "We avoid direct confrontation. We pursue the underlying causes. Every man Mars is connected to is exposed. We illuminate them. Their records, their deals, their back channels. We leak everything." "You trying to destroy him?" Darius stated. "I'm reminding him that just because I walked away doesn't mean I forgot how to play." The men nodded. Over the next 3 days, Darius orchestrated a quiet demolition. Public records were sent to journalists. Photos were sent to wives. Hidden accounts were reported to the IRS. One of Mars' clubs suddenly got flagged for health code violations. Yet another establishment lost its liquor license abruptly. The process was handled discreetly and legally. However, the implications were unmistakable. By Friday, the SUV ceased appearing at Imani's school. Mars became silent. There was no retaliation, no communication, but the situation remained unresolved. That evening, Imani returned from school, and discovered Darius at the kitchen table with the envelope from the club placed before him. She sat opposite him. For the first time, she inquired, "What did you used to do?" He regarded her for a prolonged period. Then he responded, "I engaged in actions I regret, actions that instilled fear in people, actions that ensured our sustenance." She acknowledged this slowly. "And now, I'm striving to become someone different." She paused. "But you reverted to those actions to safeguard me." "I reverted to protect you from those who disregard the established guidelines. Not out of desire, because it was necessary." She remained silent for a moment. "I wish to no longer experience fear," she stated finally. He reached across the table. "You are not. Not anymore." They remained seated for a while. As evening approached, no elaborate words were needed. It was a moment of shared understanding between two people. The following week at school, Imani offered to read her essay in English class. Her voice was steady. The essay explored courage, not the dramatic kind seen in films, but the courage to appear regardless, to speak even when hesitant, and to remain upright despite external pressure. Following the class, Ms. Kendrick offered a subtle smile, conveying a sense of pride. Imani returned the gesture, a quiet but genuine expression. Darius understood that peace achieved in this manner invariably demanded a price. He only hoped he had paid sufficiently. Spring arrived in Mobile Sutley that year. The trees bordering the schoolyard became vibrant and lush, and the days extended slightly. It had been nearly 2 months since Imani had last seen Tyler McHale's face. She never learned precisely what had transpired with him. Speculation circulated. He transferred schools. His dad took a leave. His family relocated. However, no one provided verification, and Imani had no desire to inquire. Her attention was now directed elsewhere. When Northwood High School announced the annual student-led assembly, Ms. Kendrick urged Imani to participate, to do more than simply attend, to speak. Initially, she felt unsure. However, something within her changed. A form of understated bravery emerged. It wasn't boisterous or flamboyant, but resolute, much like herself. Consequently, she registered. On the day of the event, as her name was announced, the gym grew almost silent. Teachers leaned forward. Students ceased their whispers. Imani walked to the podium with her hands at her sides. Her notes were folded in one pocket, untouched. She surveyed the crowd. Rows of students who had once laughed at her now ignored her or simply averted their gaze. And she began. "My name is Imani Reddick. A few months ago, I wished no one would know my name. I didn't want to be noticed. I believed that staying quiet would keep me safe." She paused. But silence doesn't always guarantee safety. Occasionally, it merely renders you unseen by those who could offer assistance. It was painfully obvious to those who intended harm. Several people looked my way, and some averted their gaze. I experienced bullying. It wasn't due to any action on my part, simply because I didn't align with someone else's preconceived notion of how I should appear. It was a painful experience, and it diminished my sense of self. She briefly looked towards the back of the gym, where Darius stood partially obscured, with his arms crossed, observing her. However, I realized that silence does not equate to strength. Understanding when and to whom it's important to speak, that is strength. I believed I needed to manage everything independently. I was mistaken. She averted her gaze, then returned her attention upwards. I now have an advocate for me, not simply offering verbal support, but demonstrating tangible assistance. And I want every person present to acknowledge this, particularly those who have felt as I once did. You are not obligated to face challenges alone. The initial response was silence, a pause where the words resonated powerfully and truthfully. Then, a single clap broke the stillness. It was followed by others, until the room was filled with applause. Imani moved forward without a smile. It wasn't necessary. Her words carried the impact. Following the assembly, several students came to speak with her. They were subdued and showed deference. Many simply expressed their gratitude. Others offered their apologies. A few inquired about spending time together. She paused, considering her response. That evening, back at home, Darius prepared grilled chicken on the patio. The aroma of charcoal and sweet onions filled the air. Imani sat close by, her knees drawn to her chest, observing the dancing flames. Did you truly mean what you expressed? Darius questioned. He flipped the meat once. Then he glanced at her. Your mother. She used to speak like that. Imani smiled. You think she'd be pleased? I know she would. A silence followed. She'd also say I'm allowing you to mature too quickly, he added. Imani laughed once. You sort of are. He chuckled. I suppose we're both learning. Later, as the sun dipped behind the houses, they sat in quietness. Not the kind they used to carry around like armor. This quietness was different, lighter. Imani didn't require her father to be flawless. Her need was simply for his presence. And Darius, acknowledging all he had done and all he had concealed, understood that safeguarding her didn't invariably involve burying the past. Occasionally, it meant accepting responsibility for it, so she wouldn't have to. Existence rarely offers a complete escape from sources of pain. Yet it provides a choice. Remain silent, or voice your truth. Walk independently, or accept another support. Imani opted to speak, and Darius chose to listen. This is how they found healing. As a united front. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to see more. Each story we share explores authentic choices, real people, and the resilience needed to progress, regardless of your beginnings.